Good afternoon, good morning, happy Tuesday at least, year 10. Okay, so yesterday you would have had your IT time to complete your speeches, but we are having to adapt what we're doing just in these last two lessons to acknowledge the fact that I'm not there to assess you. Now, guys, we are absolutely going to have to start year 11 with that NEA assessment, that speech assessment. It cannot disappear, but it's a job that needs me there to do the assessment. So we're going to look in the last two lessons this week at bridging the gap from the NEA, so from the speeches you've been preparing, to your actual GCSE exam. Because you've now written and prepared a persuasive speech as part of your GCSE course, you may think you are done with speeches. You might think that this job is done. I've not recorded you. You've escaped few having to be assessed this side of year 11. But the truth is, you will have to potentially write a speech as part of your exam at the end of year 11. In language paper 2, there is a written task that asks you potentially to write a speech. It might ask you to write an article. It might ask you to write a persuasive leaflet or argument. But we've often seen speeches come up as an exam task. So we're going to work through an exam task together to highlight those key transferable elements from our speech writing that you've done this week leading up to your lesson in the IT suite yesterday and the exam. Okay, my lovelies? So into your books for me, if you could write today's date, which is the 20th of July, and the title, Bridging from the NEA to Your Course. Okay, and if there's somebody there who's in control of everything, I'm hoping that's a teacher, you might want to just give them 30 seconds to press pause whilst they get down today's title, Bridging from the NEA to Your GCSE, and today's date of the 20th of July. Thank you. Okay, so as it says here then, we're going to look at the things that are transferable. Now, the transferable elements, what do we keep? Well, we keep the appeals of rhetoric. We keep and practice that in your exam, in your GCSE exam, if you're asked to write an article, if you're asked to write a persuasive speech, if you're asked to write potentially a response that you will need, your ethos, your logos, and your pathos, you will need to you will need to create a particular face, your ethos, present the face of your writer, the face of your speaker. You will need to appeal to logos, the audience or the reader's rationale, reasoning part of their brain through facts and statistics. And you'll want to combine that with some language choices that appeal to pathos, that create that sense of emotion. So those three elements do not disappear. Yep, in lessons, we've prepped and planned a speech to be delivered, but we actually want to understand and bank the knowledge of understanding around ethos, logos, and pathos, which we will take forward. Also, a written speech in an exam situation still includes the invention, the arrangement, and the style. You just don't have to memorize and deliver this speech because it's a written response achieved in exam conditions. So we're going to look today and tomorrow at how we transfer these elements, the ethos, logos, and pathos, the invention, arrangement, and style in exam conditions, which means we need an exam task. So guys, I don't want you to write down all of this task. I'm going to direct you to what I'd like you to write in a minute. But as it appears on screen, okay, this is exactly how an exam task looks in your GCSE exam. So it says really clearly up the top here, if you look with me, section B is a writing section. So you're being assessed on your writing skills. You are advised to spend 45 minutes on this section. So the first thing we have to be aware of is time constraint, okay? Writing a speech in 45 minutes is very different to the way we've written a speech over these past few lessons. We've had lessons to research, you've had lessons to practice and redraft. So one of the things we have to think about is how do we compress all of those skills into a 45-minute response? Okay, so that's the first thing, that this exam response is 45 minutes. You write in full sentences, you need to plan your answer, and you should leave enough time to check your work at the end. So in 45 minutes, we've got to write a speech. So the question will then explain certain elements. So let's look at this together, okay? So again, I don't want you to rush to write this down. I'll make it really clear what I'd like you to write in a minute. So it says here that education is not just about which school you go to or what qualifications you gain. It's also about what you learn from your experiences outside of school. Write a speech for your school or college leavers day to explain what you think makes a good education. So guys, this is the bit that I would like you to start to write down. Okay, so I would like you to write down, okay, that you're being asked to write a speech. So every exam question will make it really clear what you're being asked to write. Now, we sometimes use this technical word genre, so that we recognize under exam conditions, you might be asked to complete different types of writing activities, different genres of writing. A speech, an article, a letter are the key types that come up in section B for paper 2. So they're what we call transactional writing, writing that has a very particular job to do. So it's not creative writing, it's not fictional writing, it's not the writing of stories. In paper 2, it's always what we call transactional. So writing that has a very particular job to do. So could we all just write down that we're being asked today to write a speech? Okay, that's the type of writing. But we're being asked to write a speech for a very particular audience. Okay, so we have to work out who we're writing for. Now, your audience will help you make some decisions. So it says here our audience is school or college leavers, because we're writing for a school or college leavers day, this speech, okay? So we're immediately thinking, okay, these are the who. This is the people I have to imagine are in front of me when I deliver my speech. So I've got who would be in front of me on a school college leavers day. There's the obvious, the students, the people that are leaving, but you might have teachers, the head teacher, you might have governors, you might have parents. So it reminds us that our audience is quite mixed, okay? We're not just writing for children our own age, for students our own age, but potentially a wider audience. So we should have written down now that we're writing a speech and it's for school or college students on their leavers day. So make sure you've written that down. But there's a third element that this task sets us up for. So we're writing a speech. So what are we being asked to write? A speech. Who are we writing for? School or college leavers. Okay, so slightly older, so like year 11s like you're going to be. And we're being asked to explain what you think. Okay, it's asking you for your opinion. So you're writing a speech for other students offering your opinion. So far, so broad. So what actually is our opinion on? So we are being asked to share our opinion on what makes a good education. So the task will always introduce a particular topic and purpose. Okay, now when we think about purpose, that word explain means that we have to give reasons for what we think. So we're being invited to draft and write a speech today that offers our opinion, our thoughts on what makes a good education. But because we have to explain it, we're going to have to give reasons why we think what we think. Okay, and it's for other school students, so people our age, year 11s, but people like me, your teacher, people like the head teacher, Mr. Plum. So when we begin to write and think about our speech, we've got to do it from two perspectives. The first lens is, well, what do I really think makes a good education? What's my perspective? What position am I speaking from? But also, who am I speaking to? Other school students, other groups. So I'm just going to ask that you maybe pause here at this stage to make sure you've got these three ideas written down. The what you're being asked to write. So I'm being asked to write a speech. Who are you writing for? School or college leavers. And what is the topic of your speech? And purpose to explain what makes a good education. Now, if you want a little bit more details for that word explain, that just means give my opinion with reasons why. That's a really important hook around explanation. We have to give reasons why. So I'm just going to ask whoever's in the room with you, my lovely helper today, the teacher that's with you, just to press pause to give you probably no longer than 2 minutes to make sure you've got written down that you're writing a speech for a school college leavers day about what makes for a good education. Okay, guys, so now we have to think, well, what do we keep from our speech practice that we've done this in recent weeks? And to help us, we're going to have to think today that we still need to do a bit of invention, a bit of planning and research. Now, when we did this in class, we broke our research into 5 key areas. We said we wanted a definition, an explanation, and potential history for the topic you'd chosen. We wanted to find, number 2, some facts and statistics. And we wanted to draw upon expert and witness contributions. So in other words, the opinion of other people. We might look at other existing articles and texts that are out there, something that somebody else has written about global warming, deforestation, and we want to think about the real world application. So what does our topic really mean in the real world? Now, guys, we have to recognize that we have to be creative here. In an exam situation, you have no time to research. You have no time to find expert witness contributions on Google. You have no time to think about the history of a topic. Okay, so we could recognize that some of these areas we just have to be creative in. In other words, we might have to fake our evidence. We might have to create fake evidence, facts and statistics. We might need to create the voice of a false expert. Dr. Amy Doidge is an expert in anything when it comes to speech writing under exam conditions. Yeah, because nobody will know that I'm your teacher and not a real expert. And you're still illustrating the skill of needing expert witnessing contribution within your response. So we say it's okay to fake your evidence. But this is the big disclaimer, okay? But we're not unrealistic. So we don't make up crazy statistics like 1,022% of school children think education's great. Okay, we need to ground our fake evidence, our fake research in a little bit of realism. So we have to very quickly in a minute make up some statistics, make up some research. Now, I don't want to go too far into this today, but the exam is structured in such a way that it would often begin with articles that you have read and analysed that might give you some evidence that you can use. But if there's no usable evidence, that's okay. The big thing I'm saying here is that it's okay if you know nothing about a topic, because we fake it. Ideally, we want to bring to the topic a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of understanding, and the exam board is designed, in theory, to choose topics and things that they want you to write about that you might have some knowledge of. So guys, remembering, we've got to write a speech about what makes for a good education. So hopefully, fingers crossed, you might have some knowledge to bring to the table. So what does this look like for us? Well, it looks like a table, okay? It looks for quick planning. Remember, you've got 45 minutes in an exam. So in a minute, I'm going to ask whoever's with you to pause and be really strict on this next stage, because I'm only going to give you 5 minutes. So I'm going to explain it, and then you're going to get 5 minutes to do it. So quick planning. So quick planning means we approach our topic like a question. So we've been asked to write a speech for School Leavers Day to explain what you think makes a good education. So our immediate planning is we turn the task into a question. Okay, what makes for a good education? Okay, so everybody write down what makes for a good education. Now, guys, I'm going to show you the table in stages. So as I do this, I'm going to ask you to write with me, but then give you time to fill in the gaps, okay? So the first thing we think is, well, what makes for a good education? I have to give my opinion. I have to explain what I think. I have to give my ideas about what makes for a good education. Now, the rule of thumb is always think in threes in a minute. So we're going to come up with 3 sentences that begin like this. A good education is, or a good education must. Now, guys, I'm going to talk to you. I'm not going to write on the board as such because I want it to be your ideas. So I might say, right, okay, thinking on the spot, a good education is, a good education must. So a good education must infuse and encourage students to love learning. So I would write down a good education must infuse and make students happy to learn. Now, if you agree with me, you can write that down. You can steal that idea. If you don't agree with me, come up with your own ideas. So that's the starting point. That's my first opinion. I think a good education must encourage students to love learning for learning's sake. Okay? So I need to give a reason. I need a because. So why do I think it's really important? A good education gives reasons to love learning. Okay? Because if you love learning, you will be a happy student. If you love learning new things, if you learn to love the process of being taught and educated, that will stay with you for life and it will make you a happy learner. Okay? So under my because, I might say a good education must encourage and enthuse students to enjoy being in school, because then they become happy learners, because they become happy lifetime learners. Okay, now look at these other two words, but and so. So we recognize in a speech, but we're planning quickly, that there's always the counter argument, the but moment. Now, although we want to think of a but moment for each of the three ideas we're going to come up with, it gives us scope to develop our writing in depth. We might recognize that this is a bit harder, okay? So a good education must make students lifelong learners and fall in love with learning. But we recognize that sometimes education fails in this area. But we recognize sometimes students are bored, but sometimes education gets it wrong. But sometimes the way learning is done in schools doesn't meet that need. There's my but moment. So do we stop? So the so is, well, what's the balance? Okay, how do we reconcile? We want students to be happy because, but there's something stopping them. So education needs to rethink how it delivers ideas and content in the classroom to engage students. So I've got my because, my but, my so. Now, if we look at these two other areas, a good education is, we need 3 points we're going to make. Yep, a good education is, a good education must, because, but, so. So in other words, you need to give me 3 reasons when we press pause in a minute, what a good education is. Now, this is absolutely your opinion. This is absolutely what you think. But the really important part is that you could give me a reason why. So if you say a good education must stop forcing children to sit in rows in a classroom and run around in a field, that's your opinion. But give me a reason why. And then think about the but that might lead to health and safety issues. But actually, although students might think they're happy running around outside, is it actually giving them knowledge? So guys, I want you to really quickly write down in the next 4 or 5 minutes this table. 3 reasons what you think makes for a good education. So you might say a good education is made up of good teachers. A good education is people, experts that know their stuff. A good education is a well-equipped classroom. Now, we could say that because equipment means that we can learn, that we can be interactive in our learning. But guys, then you're saying that any country that's impoverished, that can't produce good classrooms, is actually failing to provide a good education. And you find that some students do incredibly well in impoverished countries because they fundamentally are desperate to learn. Yeah? So, again, up to your teacher at this stage. You could work in quietly, silently. I'll let them direct that. But you're going to get about 5 minutes to write down your 3 gut responses. Now, guys, in an exam under time conditions, don't overthink it. A good education is. Give me the reasons why, but think about some of the limitations to that. The but moment's the limitation, but what stops that education being offered? So what's the solution? Okay, and your time starts now. Okay, so that's a quick plan. So you should have 3 opinions, 3 of your own ideas about what makes for a good education. Okay, you might then have your reasons why. We absolutely want that because if you manage to make it to a but and a so, that shows really good quick planning. So now we've got our plan. What else do we need to remember? Okay, well, we are going to be using exactly the same structure, okay, as we did for our speeches in class. So this is a structure that we learned, that we take into the exam with us for the future. Okay, so we remember that the character stage, okay, is going to be the opening of our speech, is going to capture the attention of the audience and introduce the topic. That we're going to have the setting stage, in which we state what the argument will be, the main point that we're going to prove and why it's important. We're going to have to outline our main points, use evidence to support the argument, and set out and challenge the opposing argument. So guys, I just want to pause there because really, at the rising action stage, that's what we've just planned. We've just planned 3 main points, what we think, in terms of our opinion, as to what makes a good education. Yeah, we've said because as the starting point of setting out our opinion, and then the but is the starting point of the challenge. So if we've completed that table, we're really saying that we've planned our rising action. Now, the evidence is the bit we haven't planned in that table. The evidence is something we're going to think about as we build our writing across today and tomorrow. And like I said, that's where we fake some statistics. 62% of children that enjoy being at school achieve their grades. 22% of children that are unhappy in school do not achieve their full potential. So we start to make up some evidence as we begin to write. But remember, we're planning, so it's that quick plan. So then we will go to a climax, the big emotional point. And if you remember, the falling action is where we're going to create a positive and hopeful tone. What can be achieved if we change? What can be achieved if we all understand what a good education is? And then we're going to come up with a summary of the main idea. And we're going to describe why it's important, why it's urgent, in the sense that we need people to understand what a good education is. So guys, I don't need you to write that down. I'm just reminding you that we're going to use this structure as we plan and write together today. And what we're going to focus on in the next part of this lesson is just really writing our character and setting sections today. And then tomorrow we're going to focus on the rising action, the climax, and the end. Okay? So we need to get our first paragraph done. Okay, now we are going quick because we're in exam conditions. We've got 45 minutes to do this, so we're not overthinking. We've got our table and we're going to now begin to write our opening paragraph. This is the moment where we capture the attention of the audience, we introduce the topic, and we kind of set up that greeting. So we need to remind ourselves at this stage that we're writing for a school or college leavers, and we're going to start with option 1. Now guys, as we go through this process, you will see there will be an option 1 and an option 2. Option 1 we get done quickly. Option 2 we're just going to build a little time of thinking and planning around. So option 1, guys, is the get the job done option. In an exam, sometimes we need to stop overthinking and we need to get the job done. So a get the job done paragraph that captures the attention of the audience, introduces the topic and greets them, looks like this. Ready? Good morning, year 11. There I've greeted the audience and I've made it clear who they are, school, college leavers. Okay, good morning, year 11. As part of our Leavers Day celebrations, I am here to share what makes for a good education. So again, good morning, year 11. As part of our Leavers Day celebrations, so I'm showing I know the context that the task has given me, I'm here to share what makes for a good education. Now, I used to love using the Ronseal advert as an example here. Get the job done, because Ronseal used to have the tagline, does exactly what it says on the tin. So this is a speech opening that does exactly what it should do for a speech opening. It's not necessarily creative and it's not very stylish, but it gets the job done. So good morning, year 11. As part of our Leavers Day celebrations, I'm here to share what makes for a good education. So guys, you're going to practice now. You get to practice getting the job done. So a very quick 2 sentences at the most where you're going to greet the audience and introduce the topic. Okay, and your time, you're going to get 3 minutes and your time starts now. So guys, that is our safe getting the job done opening. But I want to just take some time to show you the ways that we can expand that so we're more creative. So we're going to get creative. Now, I have to give you some information to help us get creative. So if you look on the board, you will see that I did a bit of pre-research for us. Now, I did say sometimes you can fake it, and I'll talk to you about faking it in a minute. But because this is a learning environment, we are learning, I thought I would give us some information. So remember, how do we get creative? Well, we can use a peg or a rhetorical figure in our openings. Now, our pegs here refer to dramatization, so linking good education to a real-world event. And we've got down here Nick Gibb, linking it to a person. So who is Nick Gibb? Well, he is the school's minister. So it's his job to know what's important in education and why it's important to have excellent teachers. Okay, so he actually delivered a speech, we're not going to look at it, about what makes for a good education in the 21st century. But basically, we can name drop Nick Gibb. Nick Gibb is the education minister. Okay, so he's saying that curriculum is important to a good education, so what we're learning, excellent teachers is important, but also you might want to add that other things that make a good education important are extracurricular activities, creativity, the arts, experiences, relationships. So what is a good education? Teachers, curriculum, and experiences. So if you've got your 3 points and you're not happy with them, you can begin to change them as we go through this process. So what makes for a good education? Okay, teachers, curriculum, and wider experiences. Now, above it, we've got a document. I've just screen ripped this from UNICEF. So UNICEF, we know, are a worldwide charity that look to safeguard and look after children all across the world. Okay, and it says here that the right to an education is one of the most important principles in becoming a rights-respecting school. And it says that education is a key social and cultural right and plays an important role in reducing poverty and child labour. Furthermore, education promotes democracy, peace, tolerance, development, and economic growth. There are a number of articles in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child that focus on a child's right to education. Articles 28 and 29 focus on a child's right to an education and on the quality and content of education. Article 28 says that state parties recognise the right of children to education and should take all appropriate measures to ensure that school discipline is administered in a manner consistent with child's human dignity. Article 29 focuses on the aims of education and says that governments agree that education of the child is directed to. Now, I've deliberately left it off here because I don't want all the information, but what it means is we can mention, okay, from our facts and statistics, our research point of view, UNICEF promote and advocate that education is really important. Education is important and it's a right for every child. So good education is a right. It's a key aspect of society and culture. Now, I love this. Look, it says education, good education should promote democracy, peace, tolerance, development. Now, in a minute, I'm going to ask you just to write down from this page three words or phrases that you're going to bank to use in your speech. Okay, so you might write down the phrase, UNICEF say education reduces poverty, child labour. It promotes democracy, peace, tolerance. And you might just write down the name that Nick Gibb believes curriculum and excellent teachers are really important as part of a good education. So guys, we're not going to stay at this point, but we're going to just pause now. And in the 3 minutes, I just want you to bank for our research, for our evidence, 3 phrases, 3 ideas from this page that you will use in your speech. So you can either pause me or you can work with me. So you can keep my voice going as you do this, or you can pause and have your own voices. Okay, but my voice is just going to say, then I'm going to write down that education promotes democracy, that education is part of every child's right, therefore it's important, that UNICEF fights for the rights to education, that Nick Gibb says education comprises excellent teachers and a good curriculum. Okay, guys, so just pause and make sure you've got 3 ideas written down that's going to help us get creative. Okay, so another use of a peg. Remember, we talked about dramatization, using the story of somebody else. And we can't really think about good education without reminding ourselves of Malala. Now, it just tells us here, now this is all, again, just using quick fire little bits of information that we can use to bring into our speeches. So she is a Pakistani activist for female education and the youngest Nobel Prize laureate. Okay, she's 24 years old. And I love this quote from her, that one child, one teacher, one book, one pen can change the world. Now, we know that Malala has a bigger story, that she herself was a victim of an assassination attempt as she was on her way to school. That she said that education was so important for her, she would rather risk her life to get her education than not. Okay, so all of these, so we've got UNICEF, Nick Gibb, and Malala making a really clear message about the value of education. They become the pegs that we can use. So again, what I just want you to make sure is we've got a peg list that we can use as we're doing our article. This is about being creative and bringing the stylistic features. So we might make a note that we've got Nick Gibb, who's telling us that good education equals excellent teachers and academic curriculum. We can lovingly balance that against UNICEF. Now, UNICEF aren't talking about curriculum here or excellent teachers. They're actually saying that education is more fundamental. It promotes democracy. peace, tolerance, and is the right of every child. And then we've got Malala, who just from that simple quote is saying that good education really, that made up of a child, a teacher, a book and a pen. So Malala says good education equals a child, teacher, book and a pen can change the world. So we've got lovely references now to GIB, UNICEF and Malala that become our evidence bank, our peg bank. So then as we begin to craft our speech, we can rewrite that opening to do an even better job. We can go from our functional opening to an opening that begins to use these ideas. Now, we don't have to get Nick Gibb, UNICEF and Malala all into our reworked opening, not a chance. But in a minute, we can begin to think about choosing one that we might use in our opening and saving Gibb, UNICEF or Malala for elsewhere in our speech. Now, that's our pegs covered. We've got a peg list. Everybody's got written down, hopefully, ideas that they're going to use and bank. So we're just going to remind ourselves of rhetorical figures, and then we're going to rework that opening. So, fun with rhetorical figures because I love it. So if you remember when we were doing this last week for our speech, across the top, we got hyperpoporia, asking and answering a rhetorical question. So what makes for a good education? A good education teaches us the value of ourselves and the contribution we can make to society. And diplosis, starting a new sentence with the same word used to end the last sentence. I'm here to explain what makes for a good education. A good education teaches us to love learning and to value knowledge as the true source of power. Polysyndentation. UNICEF fights for every child's right to an education and a good education at that. So the repeated use of and to link items in a list. Now, even just looking at this, I'm thinking of the research, UNICEF fights for every child's right to an education, and a good education is the source of democracy and peace and tolerance. So I could even rework that sentence better to make it better. Now, ampoporia or anaphoria, repeating the same sentence opening. A good education begins with expert teachers who know their stuff. A good education begins with students who understand that knowledge is the antidote to ignorance. And then Leotes, describing things in terms of what they are not. A good education is not simply what is a good education is not simply what's learnt in the classroom. It is not entertaining children whilst their parents work. It is not a way to distract children until they are old enough to be taken seriously. And then I might answer it, a good education is. Now, what I want you to do at this stage, okay, you're just going to pause, leave this on the screen, and you are going to commit to using one of these rhetorical figures in your writing. So you've got your peg list where you've written down your pegs you're going to use. At the end of that peg list, you're going to choose one rhetorical figure. So you might say, I'm going to use, or if you don't want to use the Greek word, you're going to say, I'm going to ask and answer a rhetorical question. I'm going to start a new sentence with the same word used to end the last. I'm going to use a list of, I'm going to repeat and to link items in a list. I'm going to repeat the same sentence opening. I'm going to describe things in terms of what they are not. So what you're going to do is you've got your peg list in your book. Now, at the end of your peg list, you are just going to add the rhetorical figure. Try and aim for one if you want to aim for two. Sometimes it's quite easy to combine the asking and answering a rhetorical question and starting a new sentence with the same word used to end the last. So look, I've got my asking and answering a rhetorical question also as an example of antiplosis. So we're going to pause here and you're going to write down one rhetorical figure that you are going to use in your reworked opening. Okay, so we've now got a way to rework our opening so we can be creative. So we want to just go beyond being a get the job done kind of opening to a creative opening. So I've looked at my peg list. I've got Nick Gibb, UNICEF and Malala. And I've also now set myself the challenge to ask and answer a rhetorical question as I rewrite my opening. So we're going to, and I'm also going to include a reference to Malala. So I'm now writing my creative and stylish opening. Now you can immediately see I've written more than option one, getting the job done, and that's okay. So follow with me, see some of the changes that I've made. Good morning, fellow students and teachers. We're here to celebrate that we have made it. We have completed the curriculum, sat the exams, and exasperated and pleased our teachers in equal measure. But what have we really learned? From the works of Dickens in the 1800s to the modern day activist Malala, we are powerfully challenged to realise that education really can change the world. But is our education good enough to teach us that we are now world changers? And what does that even mean anyway? So guys, look at my reworked opening. So I've gone from getting the job done, which is a sign of success, to now matching it with being stylish and creative, which would always get me higher grades. Can you see I've underlined where I've integrated my reference to Malala? I've drawn upon my own knowledge because I've put in Dickens, and I've got my lovely rhetorical question, but what have we learned? And the answer, from the works of Dickens, we've learned that education can change the world. So you are now going to get probably about 5 minutes to write your opening that is going to be creative and stylish. Okay, so you're going to write an opening that is creative and stylish. Now, if it takes you to the end of the lesson, I'm just conscious that with the way I record these, that you might have, by the time you've stopped and written, been close to the end of the lesson. Brilliant. So we're all going to end with a really nice opening, creative and stylish, character and setting. Okay, if you get that done quite quickly, Miss can or Sir can just go across to the second video that's getting us started for tomorrow. Okay, guys, so I'm expecting to see a creative and stylish opening that's using something off our peg list and a rhetorical feature, and really sets a strong sense of engagement. Okay, off you go, and I'll see you tomorrow.